Well, I think we can do a lot better. Honestly, we can do a lot better. I agree to some extent with what my colleague is saying on three other areas, those three other areas. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is a time when we usually would have the highest inflation rate because of seasonal variation. This is when we are planting. This is the planting season. So obviously, commodity prices are meant to be about 50% higher in cost. But now we have the nearly 100%. Pepper is 100% increase because of the fuel hike in fuel price. As I told you, that's affecting the prices of commodities. Electricity price, for instance, people, just look at the cost, how the meters are running, with the speed of light. Or not to talk of the impact of the exchange rate, of course, with goods coming in a bit more expensive, that passes through straight down to consumers. So we have all these contrived, they're all contrived. And the CBN can do more. I don't understand why CBN could release 1.36 trillion naira intervention fund, and they're not making conscious effort to deliver this money to the base of the pyramid entrepreneurs where it is most needed. Because if you do 5% interest rate on agriculture and deliver, the issue is the delivery, implementation. Deliver those and not allow the commercial banks to hold these monies in transit. Because I quite support the fact that CBN has reduced the cash reserve ratio in order to free more reserve. I understand that. But there should be more effort. For example, look at people like Dangote, is doing very well. They remember that 2006 he was an importer. This man is also an importer. So these are many importers. Now we should be attacking these importers and showing them the way to the intervention fund so that they can get into more productive activities with their counterparts in Korea, in China, and all. We've got to connect these people. So we're not making any connection between the resources made available and the crisis points. So we're not making any connection at all. And that is where it offends.
Okay,
all right.
We must thank Ken Ife there. Many thanks for your contribution this morning on TVC Breakfast. And Mike, you got a lot
certainly. Let's take a quick look at how this ripple effect comes on the common man. Now, food prices rose by 12.7% in March compared to what obtained a year ago, due partly to higher transportation costs and foreign exchange movements generally. Now, we have right here. Now, consumer rate also increased by 12.8% year-on-year in March of 2016, following an 11.4% jump in previous months. Now, the result of this falls more on the high price of food commodity. Now, we will restrict the price differentiation to the commercial city of Lagos. Let's see how they pan out there. Now, in November last year, a bag of rice went for between 9,000 naira to 10,000 naira, but today it is sold for between 13,000 naira to 15,000 naira. And moving ahead as well, a bag of beans sold for between 9,500 to 10,000 naira in November 2015, and now it goes for between 13,000 to 14,000 naira per bag. Now, moving further there, a tuber of yam was sold between 300 and 500 naira in November 2015, but today it goes for between 600 and 800 naira. Now, going ahead as well, we have a bottle of groundnut oil and palm oil now sells for between 300 and 350 naira. And that's 1 liter of bottle compared to the 250 naira it was sold for in November 2015. Now, let me come back to Henry here. The issue of policies. I'd like to talk about the issue of monetary policies here. We have seen the effect and impact on a daily basis, prices increasing generally. What should government do in real terms when it comes to policies and this?
You see, the issue of monetary policy is tri-headed. Unfortunately, Nigerians, and to some extent, a lot of Africans, always look at the budget as the driver of the economy.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, the budget is only about 6 trillion naira, about $30 billion. Whereas the Nigerian economy, even at worst, 510 billion GDP or whatever, people believe that it could even approach $1 trillion. So you can understand that $30 billion worth of government intervention in terms of budget application and implementation and all that, it's not really significant. What is significant to enable us to realize this potential of $1 trillion is a vehicle that is driven on the wheels of positive monetary indices. That is what happens everywhere in the world. It's impossible for anyone to tell you that you will diversify the economy now or ever if those monetary indices are not supportive. It is impossible for anyone to say you would increase the level of employment in the system if those indices are not there. It is like trying to build a table without legs. And those monetary indices that I referred to are precisely inflation, cost of funds, and exchange rate. And invariably, all those three factors are driven by the amount of money that is available. Now, the controller of your money supply has readily admitted and constantly admitted, indeed the past three central bank governors have all admitted that they have had a challenge with managing money supply. So what you have to do in order to drive your economy is to ensure, for example, that inflation does not exceed 0.5% or 1% or 2%, as the case may be, as in successful economies elsewhere. It is also to make sure that cost of funds to the real sector is not this sort of selective, sectoral, you take 7%, you take, and then I'll bring. You see, when you even introduce intervention funds become counterproductive in an environment that is already suffocated with money, with Naira supply. So, so don't be surprised when you find all these intervention funds and you say, but the prices are still going up. Because why? It is like you have a glass of water, a cup of water, it's already full with money, and you still say the problem is money. So you pour in some more and it starts overflowing. When it starts overflowing, you say, let me mop this money up, notwithstanding the cost that I pay for it. When you continue to have that kind of relationship between supply of money and the supply of goods, you will not be able to drive the country in the manner in which you want, because you will be deceiving yourself if your rate of inflation, your cost of funds, and your exchange rate are all totally moving in reverse gear.
Yeah, talking about the exchange rates, of course, the CBN can't even get enough of knocks and antagonism in that area. But some issues are beginning to come up as regards importation of goods, like for the manufacturing sector, the electronics, for instance, are people importing at the very exorbitant high exchange rate, that if the exchange rate had been made a bit more available, that probably will help the situation, and which of course wouldn't affect the rise in inflation so much.
Well, let me ask you, how much more do you think the forex supply should be expanded? The issue is not supply. The issue is the relationship between the Naira and the dollar. The CBN, unfortunately, has created a market paradigm that ensures that the Naira would always be subjected to a downward, to depreciation, for a very simple reason. If you have an auction, if I had to auction this, I would be, for example, that means I would be selling it to the person who pays me the highest price, the highest bidder. Every week, the central bank, in fact, sometimes twice a week, the central bank auctions the dollar against the Naira. In other words, the central bank is hoping that whoever pays the highest bid for the dollar is auctioning would receive more dollar supply. The more desperate you are, for example, if you're a thief or a political thief or whatever who has stolen, no, not really, I mean, let's be serious, and you intend to just take your money out of the country, you are prepared to pay 300 or 400 Naira. So people like this will drive the exchange rate of the market because the CBN is selling the dollar to the highest bidder. So you find, in a very strange twist of things, that agency that's supposed to be the protector of the Naira actually sets up the Naira for a huge fall, because here you are auctioning the dollars, rations of dollars, against, in a market where there is a surplus supply of Naira. So there's no matter what you do, even if you earn more foreign exchange, you still have that problem, because the foreign exchange that you earn will be substituted eventually by with more Naira by the central bank, and then the huge Naira bulk would now be pitched against rations of dollar, which they seem to be now auctions. So you find that in a very farcical, very creative financial engineering, the Naira is deliberately set up for a big fall.
Okay, there's the new China deal, Nigeria and China deal, like we heard, has probably given rise to the issue of having yuan in our foreign exchange market in Nigeria. Will that help the Naira bounce back? Is it possible?
No, it wouldn't. It's just, you see, some actions you sometimes wonder, okay? The Chinese have trillions of dollars that they are trying to protect, okay? And if the dollar depreciates in any form, the Chinese should be worried, okay? So if you had to choose between the Chinese yuan and the dollar, you would be certain that the Chinese would be on the side of protecting the value of the dollar. So there's no real big deal in saying, I want some of my reserves to be in yuan. The reality should be, we should be asking ourselves, why is it that CBN can sit on reserves of almost $28 billion? What work does it do to accumulate or earn $28 billion while we go borrowing dollars from elsewhere? What is stopping the people? For example, if we do put our money in yuan or in Chinese bank as yuan or dollars in JP Morgan and elsewhere, what is stopping those people lending the same dollars that we left there as deposits, earning very minimal yield, to people who want to invest in Nigerian government's bills and bonds, which are incidentally very lucrative? So you find that we are playing a child's game as if we are totally ignorant of what is necessary to be able to drive this economy. But it isn't ignorance, it's self-interest, because I do not believe that the people who run the economy are ignorant. They are well-educated people. But when you sometimes have self-interest as your driving motivation, you find that you do things that an uneducated person would do.
Okay, now you were talking about, you gave us an illustration earlier on about some of the policies the government is coming up with. Now, if we have to pitch them in perspectives, now the government has talked about diversifying the economy, talked about creating employment, talked about massive infrastructure generally. How would this inflation rate impact on the success of the government program generally?
You see, how can you expect growth if the people who are supposed to buy the goods that would motivate investors to want to produce are continuously able to buy less and less and less goods? And where the producers of those goods still exist, they have to borrow at 25%, and you expect them to be competitive with goods which are coming from countries where interest rate is 4 or 5%. It's a fairy tale. That cannot happen. So you find that diversification, as I emphasized earlier, it's a pipe dream without you being able to bring inflation to best practice levels below 2%, and also cost of funds, meaning, for example, the central bank's monetary policy rate should reflect or mirror what also happens in other successful economies. The monetary policy rate, I think, in the UK and the US is usually less than 2%. So what are we doing with monetary policy rates of 12% and things like that? We are not serious if we think and believe that we're ever going to get out of this rut with throwing more money as intervention funds, when the person who creates money is telling you, I have a suffocated money supply in my hands, such that you even wonder when you look at the 2016 budget, which has expanded by almost 33% from 4.5 to about 6 trillion or thereabouts. Why should you increase your such expenditure by that amount at a time that the person creating the money is saying, I have a money supply problem? You know, so obviously there's a disconnect here. The president on one hand believes or is advised that, look, pour money into the thing, we are going to spend more, we are spending, that is folly. On the other hand, you have a situation where the market is already suffocated with money. The problem with the market is not money. There is excess money. That is the problem. And how to reduce and minimize that excess supply of money is the issue. But that is not also too distant to fetch, because the CBN itself agrees that it instigates money supply whenever it captures the dollar earnings of the country and substitutes naira allocations. So long as we keep doing this, it will be meaningless to dream that you would ever grow.
So basically, the issue is mopping up excess liquidity.
Absolutely, you've got it there. That's the poison in the system.
All right. Henry Boyo, thank you very much for coming on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you.
And we also thank Kenny Fair for joining us on Skype from Abuja earlier on.